Welcome back to Hustle to Holdings, where we explore how people turn hustle into long-term holdings. Today's guest operates at a level that most people only hear about. Reilly is a capital raising professional whose experience includes helping raise 11 million in just 90 minutes and running an office for a fund that scaled from 3 million to 330 million in only 3 years. What makes this conversation so powerful isn't just the numbers. It's the discipline, leadership, systems, and trust required to operate at that level. In this episode, we're going to unpack Reilly's journey, the mindset behind scaling capital responsibly, and what most people misunderstand about growth at scale. Reilly, welcome to Hustle to Holdings.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time. So where are you calling in from today?
So I am in this little town of 85,000 people called Duluth, Minnesota. It's northern Minnesota, and it sits right at the mouth of the Lake Superior, where the St. Lawrence River system flows into. So this city has a tremendous history of working with a bunch of mines early on, with timber and forestry. And at some point at the turn of the century in the 1900s, there were more millionaires per capita that lived in Duluth than anywhere else in America. So there's a
No
tremendous
way.
amount of very unique architecture and lots of parks. It's a gorgeous location, not super well known, and that's okay for right now.
For now, I mean, hopefully now more people are I want to visit now that you mentioned that. I never knew that was in Minnesota. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous place. We've been out in Minnesota for about the last 11 years, 12 years now. It's 2026. And this has really become home. And so an important thing to me is kind of planting your flag in the ground and
Mhm.
investing in your own backyard, as long as it
Yep.
makes sense. But all those things lined up, and here we are all in, and sometimes living through negative 30-degree weather in the wintertime.
This is why I stay in Florida. I completely agree with investing in your own backyard, but Florida is my backyard and I'm staying here. I
Yeah,
love it for
absolutely.
vacation, but negative 30 degrees, it sounds like my nose is going to start bleeding as soon as I step in there right now.
Yeah, that may have something to deal with why we aren't over 100,000 in our population.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what does a typical morning look like for you on a day-to-day?
Yeah, so I would say that I really like my mornings to feel a little slower and a bit more nourishing, which is kind of on the opposite end of, I think, where most people are like, let's stack everything up, let's be as efficient as possible. I really hold that space for me because that's my me time. Like if I can slow down and I can have 2.5 cups of coffee and I can visit with my wife, and it's just kind of free time a little bit. So if I'm like, oh, you know what, I was really thinking about this in bed after that. Let me see if I can find some, is there a video of this? Does someone I know, have they already like ran into this problem? And so it's exploratory and like free time, more creative. And then I'd say probably about 10 o'clock, 11 is when I'm really getting into my meetings and being intentional about those starting then and ripping through my inbox. And then the afternoons is probably when I go to check on any projects that we have, check in with the team, with staff, look for other opportunities. And then the evening time, we typically keep pretty protected for our 10-year-old who plays sports, and he's very active in that. So we want to make sure that we're able to give as much time to him for him to be able to enjoy the things he likes.
I love that. I love slow mornings as well. It's very intimate with your significant other as well.
Yeah.
2 cups of coffee is crazy. You must be wired by the time you're opening your emails to be drinking 2 cups of coffee. But I love slow mornings where no one's rushing me, and I do get to spend some time drinking coffee with my husband. So, and then I work out in the mornings at that time. Do you like to work out mornings or evenings?
So I don't at all. Full disclosure. I used
Oh,
to, and then it just became something that, probably fell by the wayside, and not for any purpose. But it's
yeah.
just like, yeah, you know what? I'm okay. I'm comfortable with who I am, what I'm doing right now. But now that 2026 has rolled around, it's like, all right, I should get back to at least walking 5 miles every day like we used to do.
Or a sport even. Do you have snowboarding there? Or
Yeah,
mountain
we
biking?
definitely not known for all of our mountains. Our mountain biking, we're actually one of the 6 gold star systems rated in North America. So there are
Wow.
like tons of trails, an incredible amount of elevation. If you're a mountain biker, Duluth, Minnesota is incredible for that. It's worth a Google. Check out the YouTube videos.
I definitely will. So, before we get into business, tell me what drives you personally.
Oh, that's a great question. I think one of the drivers that I have is freedom from. If you're familiar with the concept, like there are two types of freedoms. There's freedom to, which allows you to do whatever you want, and the from is the elimination of obligations or some responsibilities. And
Mhm.
so, as you can continue to go further down in your career path, your path with family, for me, being able to identify things that I want to remove. I don't want to work in my business forever. I, um,
Right.
I don't even necessarily have a full goal of where I want to be, but I know that being able to take more time to travel and to be able to have more time for me to lean into hobbies that are unique and creative that I've never done before is something that really excites me. I like to learn new things and I like to problem solve, and the more time that I can give myself to do that in for future Riley, that's really what the goal is.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so for listeners who don't know you, how would you describe what you currently do today?
So I would say that I am an entrepreneur, typically within the real estate space. I just started branching out into small business. I am a relationship builder at heart. The people that work with me and on our properties, I really try to take that same team to every project we work on because we've discovered a lot about who we are as people. I know how Amy works and I know how Eric and Matt work, our contractors. We have designers, my operations assistant Sydney, our cleaning staff, all of these people we've had years of relationships with. So I consistently am, this will sound crazy. I would say that I'm probably a very selfish person. And when I find talented people that I love working with, I'm like, oh, I just need to like fill your time as much as possible so we can just work together forever. So that's really my focus right now. Being in Duluth and with the age of the city, there are a lot of buildings that are in disrepair. They're old, they're grand, but they need a ton of love. So the other faction, while I'm working through, those acquisitions and working with the team, is finding these properties that are not only distressed, but they deserve to be loved more than anything. And when they're brought back to their full glory, or there's no reason to throw a baby out with the bathwater. Maybe maybe the baby just needs to get cleaned up a little bit, right?
Yeah. So what type of distress? Like, do you like to handle properties that have MEP problems like mechanical, electric, plumbing, or just cosmetic, it needs cosmetic love, or whichever one, depending on the vision?
Yeah, so I would say we've definitely gone through all of the above. We have worked through major mechanical repairs, removal of roofs, and reinstallation with new truss packages, ripping out kitchens, installing new piping, new electrical. And then there are other projects where it's like, well, all that stuff looks good. I think we just need to replace carpeting and like redesign the interior and the bed, and we can probably just paint those cabinets rather than fully replace them. I think each project will, at least to me, I think I'm more of an emotional investor, right? Like if I walk in, I'm like, this could be wonderful. I just have this certainty that like, okay, I know that maybe this is a little bit thinner, but nobody's seen what this final product is going to be quite yet. And I think I trust in people and the valuation that I'll get after something that if I love it, I firmly believe that I think other people will fall in love with that product too.
I love it. You're definitely a visionary in that sense.
Yeah, maybe to a fault. I would definitely I could say that I would likely have a lot more success if everything was just about the spreadsheet, but I don't think that I've had a long enough time yet to evaluate, 10 years of investment. Maybe in 30 years I can really make that clarity. And I'm sure there are people screaming right now like, no, you can just look at all the metrics. That's going to give you all the information. But I think the unquantifiable thing for me is, did this project bring me joy and other people happiness, and did it provide something for the community? And so being able to answer that with a return is something that's really important to me.
I love it. So what did your early career look like before real estate, before the capital raising? What did you do before?
So before real estate, I was a Marine for 8 years, active duty.
Thank you for your
Um,
service.
yeah, thanks for your support. When I had gotten out, my wife and I, for the first 3 years of marriage, had spent, a total of 18 months apart. And part of the conversation to exit that career was, well, is the goal for you to like stay in this and collect a paycheck, or are we trying to stay married? So we chose the latter option. And then I had no idea about what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to go to college. I knew that I wanted to study. And when I got back in there, I'm like, this isn't gonna work. My wife was pregnant, so one of us needed to have a job, right? And she was working on her master's degree, so rock paper.
Yep.
That's the more important degree for us to follow. And so then I re-entered the military. I recruited for the Minnesota National Guard for a while. Then she got an internship. I followed her. So I was just working kind of like all these things to make ends meet and try
Mhm.
to follow some of my curiosity with studies. And then everything changed from a YouTube video. And there's a guy down in Florida, you might know him. His name is Phil Pustiowski, and
Uh-huh.
he was teaching courses before that became a really big thing. And there was an advertisement, like a 30-second clip on YouTube where it's like, I'm going to give you the three things that you need to know to crush real estate and become, incredibly wealthy. And then so he made this pitch. I'm like, that sounds really interesting. At the end of it, he's like, buy my course. I'm like, I don't need to buy it. Like, you already told me the three secrets. I can just go in on this. And that was the transition into real estate, was this random person getting in front of me. It's like, oh, advertisements work. So um, I had $50,000, and the first thing I thought was, can I buy a house for $50,000 and renovate it and increase the value? So
Mhm.
I found a house, and from first looking at that house is when everything went wrong with my first transaction. So I bought the cheapest house possible in a relatively soft market, thought that I would renovate myself to save the money. I don't know how to swing a hammer or renovate. And then a friend of mine who had just got his real estate license, who's from a completely separate market, said, hey, let me come over and I'll list this property for you. I'm like, great. So long story short, I bought a shit property. I had a shit renovation on it. I had an inexperienced agent who was leading the transaction. And surprise, surprise, nobody wanted to buy this property. So what do we do from here? All right. Well, I start reading and learn about creative financing. The house is
Okay.
paid off. So we're like, well, let's sell this on a contract for deed. We had a couple of people that came through. One gal said that, hey, I can put 25% down on this. Let's do a 3-year term. I'll pay you X% on interest. I think it was nominal. Maybe it was like 6%. And so I thought, great. This is a slower cash flow, but it'll actually return more dollars to me. 6 months go by, payments start missing, and eventually we have to go through foreclosure. So we show up to the court. I go through the spiel about what's happening. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars owed in rent. The property looks like it's in disrepair. So that whole clock extends. And then when somebody doesn't vacate, you go through something that's called a forced eviction, where
Mhm.
it's typically, at least in Minnesota, it's county sheriff deputies that show up to the property with you to reclaim that property. So we show up in Minnesota in February for this forced eviction, myself and these two officers. It's probably negative 15 degrees outside. The first thing we notice are all the windows are open. So they had opened the windows to try to create all the pipes to freeze. They had taken a 7-pound hammer to this entire house, which is an 1865 build, so it's all lath and plaster. They had all sorts of things spray painted all over the walls. And when we were going through one of these really nice sheds in the back with a roll up garage door, we opened it, and I kid you not, a mountain of trash fell out. They had just continued to stack their trash. They had never paid for trash services. And, this was an individual that, apparently went deep into some addiction. Like, we were never going to recover this money.
Yeah.
So we had to put more money into the renovation. But this time we paid for a professional to do it. Looked a million times better. And then we sold it. Um, and what I thought was, at the end of all this, having to put the money back in, I had made $1,000. Well, then come tax time, I didn't know anything about tax strategy. And so I ended up paying gains on significantly more because I didn't understand that I shouldn't file myself, or that I can depreciate things, or that I can write off the cost of a contractor, and of the materials and the labor. And so that learning lesson probably ended up costing me 13 or $15,000 as a total net loss.
And that's your
And it
first
was
deal.
and that's the greatest lesson I ever had. And, thank goodness that I learned that on a $50,000 property and not a multi-million dollar property.
Yeah,
So when things are going wrong, it feels very raw and real, and it's uncomfortable, and it's good that it's happening to you because you will learn all these things. Um, Now I've
yep.
learned it's a lot better just to listen to the wisdom of other more experienced investors and not repeat the mistakes they tell you that you're making. But every once in a while, you can get on a stubborn streak and like, no, I think I really want to learn this lesson myself.
That's entrepreneurs for you. Like, you can learn as
Yeah.
much as you can, but we can be a little stubborn. So I know that's definitely true. So wait, what got you into saying, you know what? I want more real estate after the first deal where you lost $1,500. What
Yeah.
crazy bug bit your brain to be like, let's do this again?
I think I was getting to see the transformation on that second renovation of like, this is what's possible when you bring in a professional to help you, right? And it
Okay.
reinforced that mantra of like, you need a team. You need, even if they're not direct employees, but you need people you can rely on. So we had relocated from there to another small city, and I was on the Bigger Pockets website, I believe. I was like, hey, I just moved over here. I'm really interested. I've had one investment property. I want to learn. And someone had reached out who was an agent at the time and became my boss. He started his own company, and he said, hey, do you want to come learn? We're building this company. I said, absolutely. And that was really where I cut my chops and got information and knowledge that I had just never seen before. It exposed me to the world of possibility of all these different things where you're on the outside and you're just watching people and never taking action. You're like, well, how do they do that? And this
Yeah.
answered so many of those questions about this is where we are. These are the decisions that we're going to make. And it grew from there.
Okay, what did you work in then eventually? Did you continue doing flips? Did you do wholesaling? What were you doing at that time?
Yeah. So at that point, when I started working for the company, they were all focused on long-term, rentals. So
Okay.
naturally, I followed that because it's like, well, they have a playbook. Why don't I just replicate and do the exact same things that these successful people are doing? And
Mhm.
my outcomes were better. Imagine that.
Yep.
So as we're growing the company, I'm also able to grow my long-term rental portfolio as well. I think we had ten properties by the time that I decided to part ways with them. But
Amazing.
I had an incredible experience there, learned a lot. Both my mentors in that company are incredible people and extremely successful. So I have a lot of gratitude looking back at that time in my life because I wouldn't be here without their mentorship.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, mentorship is so, so important. I also come from a long-term rental background, and I learned it all myself. But Bigger Pockets helped, going through
Hmm.
YouTube videos, like, the YouTube University is very, very real. But from long-term investing, I did learn it all myself and through books. But now that I want to get into bigger deals, which we're going to touch up on right now, I need mentorship because it's just on a bigger scale, right? There at this
Hmm.
point, raising capital is other people's money. So there I was like, you know what? For this, I need mentorship. I need to know what I'm doing because with long-term rentals, I got by. I made mistakes. I had multiple evictions, unfortunately. I had my properties flooded, but I learned from them because they're on a smaller scale. Now I can't imagine that with either a hotel or apartment building. So tell me a little bit about how you got your exposure to funds and large-scale operations.
Yeah. So I would say that went back to when I was working with Black Swan. Um, the first thing that I learned is that you need to build a community of individuals, right? If you don't have a platform to speak on and to demonstrate that you are a subject matter expert and you don't have a track record, it's really difficult for people to want to give you money. I'd say that's the same,
Mhm.
when you're evaluating a couple of stock options. If it's a new company and there wasn't this big IPO because they just started recently and you don't see demonstrated returns, it's difficult to feel comfortable handing your money to them. Now, a couple of the things that I think sets successful capital raisers apart from unsuccessful ones is where do you place the value of that capital? It's important to me if I'm going to write a check to somebody that's managing my own money that I know that they can work deeply inside of spreadsheets and are excellent at accounting or have the people on their team to do that. But on the other end, too, right? All real estate is people based. The
Yeah.
properties do not make money unless other people are involved, either as a tenant or the people doing work. So I also want to see that can you demonstrate that there is a team or that you have deep experience in managing relationships and what that looks like. I want to hear about the I want to hear about the worst problems that someone has solved and also about their greatest success stories. I want both ends of the spectrum. And so I think as someone who's going out to raise capital, you need to talk about all of those things because you will get questions because what you're answering at the fundamental, core for somebody to before they write a check is, do I trust this person to grow this $100,000 contribution?
Yeah.
And that's what you're trying to get to is that level of rapport with individuals through demonstration. So visibility is important. Referrals are always going to be your strongest options, and being comfortable building in the public view.
Hmm. That's definitely gold advice as well. Yeah, that's really good, which is why it's important to talk about the projects that you do, market yourself, so I can definitely see how that is valuable because at the end of the day, people are going to do their research on you. They're going to see how is this person going to handle my money. So, for you, what skill proved most valuable early on when raising capital when you started this process?
I would say my experience as an operator,
Okay.
um, being the individual that, is now asking people to invest money, specifically with me for projects that I find and I source and I deploy the teams. I think it was extremely helpful for them to know that, yep, I've actually done this for myself. And, when I'm working with a company that does property management and private equity for them to be able to demonstrate, yes, this is actually a thing I've done before, that's a huge competitive advantage for me. And I know that not everybody is able to put that on their resume, that that's been part of their experience. However, if you have real estate and you have tenants and you are an agent, there is a tremendous amount of experience for you to be able to lean into and to demonstrate to individuals why you are their best bet and that you're going to outperform, a bank CD.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. That's actually a great point. And at that time, did you have these larger because you're raising capital, of course, it's for larger apartment buildings. Were you talking about your experience with the smaller scale single family? Is that what you had before? Or did you also
Yep.
have apartment? Yeah,
So I
okay.
had the single family stuff and then, working for the company, we've had,
Right.
12 million dollar acquisitions for apartment buildings. And that's why the fund had been started. So I could cover all of that. But the type of investors that I work with now for myself really like I am the product, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I think it's more helpful for me to talk about my experience rather than make a comparison to another organization necessarily that I helped build to say,
Yeah.
hey, yep, I was there, but I have these tools and systems. But here's what I did by myself, right? Because that's what I have
Oh.
right now. So being able to say I've done it inside of a larger organization, but I've also been able to do this simultaneously.
I love that. That is great advice, even for me and anyone listening on how to raise capital. You can talk about the company as much as you want, and that's probably what all the other salespeople are doing. But to talk about your experience, I think you will get a connection because I believe the operator, the LP is gonna say, you know what, this person's a hustler. They've been through things and they've gotten out of it, and this is what makes me trust them. So that is gold advice. Um, so, as your fund scaled, what changed operationally for your personal fund? Because then you decided to create a fund for yourself. Is that right? When you
Nope.
left?
So I actually have not
Oh,
started
okay.
a fund. Most of what I've
Oh,
been doing recently has been a lot simpler. And so I've worked more inside of the master promissory notes. And in addition to that, I've also managed multiple joint ventures. So getting a couple of partners together who are contributing money that is small enough or we have enough capital to contribute where we don't need to jump into a syndication.
Mm,
And I think there are different avenues for everybody. Not everybody will have to start a fund. Maybe it's just about finding a couple individuals that you really like and you trust. And the more iterations that you go through with a smaller group of people, the more you understand how they work, the more you understand. We just had a major catastrophe at one of our hotels with a huge fire, and communicating with my other two partners in that deal uh, was simple. And everybody was focused on the outcome. There wasn't blame. Nobody thought that somebody had done anything wrong. We were all focused on
amazing.
problem solving. So being able to begin a relationship with people and then say, hey, yep, that was really hard. I know we're going through this, but here's another opportunity. You learn so much more about individuals through going through hardship with them than you
Yeah.
do going through nothing but success.
Tell me about that fire and how you guys are coming out of it. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was single-handedly the worst thing that has ever happened
I
to me
bet.
in my real estate career. So we had a full hotel for the weekend. We had this big marathon. It was extremely humid here for the marathon, so the people that are staying are all runners and competitors. So everyone's drawing AC power into their rooms that night. And an old junction box in the attic was uncovered and that sparked and it caught the attic insulation on fire and it ripped through. And this wasn't
No.
anything we had touched. This was work that had been completed, probably 10 to 12 years ago, judging by the date on the Romex. And when the city is full with people and you have a fire, it's really difficult to find alternative housing for these individuals for the next couple of days. So
Mm,
that was a very quick lesson in how quickly can we source additional housing in the event of an emergency, and who holds the responsibility for communicating with all these people. I have a guest communications team that does that for normal operations, but something like that happens, right? You are the owner, or if you're the
yeah.
GP, you're on site. You need to be meeting with these people. You need to firsthand see the damage. If this hotel is three states away, you fly out there, you take a look. You have to become boots on the ground. You have to lead in that scenario. So then we stopped. We shut down, and we had just opened that hotel maybe 5 weeks before that. And so we had a grinding halt because it was a fire. They needed to investigate for arson. They needed to look at permits. We had electrical engineers. I believe we had two private investigators that came out that conducted interviews. They interviewed previous owners, and that probably took about 3 months before they released a report that said, "Yep, these guys didn't do anything incorrectly." And then we had to work through our insurance claim, which took probably another 3 months after that. So from the day of the fire to when we were reimbursed was a 6 month period on, about a $2 million property. And then after that, there are other learning lessons that occurred. So our city has an ordinance where if a building is condemned and the city condemned two of our buildings, the city is withholding 25% of our insurance proceeds in an escrowed account until we are far enough along on the project where then they will release it. And the goal for that is so they don't incentivize individuals to leave the buildings condemned and take the money and run, right? They don't want to
Mm,
create blight in the city. So understanding it from their perspective was extremely frustrating because they're, holding almost $200,000 in an account that I can't touch until I satisfy some requirements for them. So it's like, all right, let's just satisfy those requirements to get access. But at some point, I'm sure that is going to create some friction and will require some conversations with a couple of our contractors as we're making draws to say, hey, can you float this for X amount of time because I'm missing a couple 100,000 in cash to pay you? It's there. Here's the proof. I'll get you in communication with the city. So I expect a couple of minor hiccups with that. But again, that really going full circle here ties back to who are you working with? Who do you have relationships with? Do these people trust you and know that they're going to get their paycheck? And fortunately, the answer to that is yes in our circumstance because we keep using the same team on everything.
okay. And your investors, how did you explain this to your investors? Did you need to do a capital call for this
Yeah,
emergency?
So no capital call, thank
Okay,
goodness.
good.
We were running tight because we just got opened. I believe a partner and I just gave, pretty minor interest-free loan to the LLC, and that carried us through, and we've been able to pay ourselves back
Nice.
since the insurance. The other huge thing was our lender. We consistently, I won't say we will only do it forever, but currently right now we only work with local lenders and with regional lenders
Okay.
because they care more about what's happening in the community. I can go into any one of their offices and have a conversation.
That makes
And our
sense.
lender was so incredible that they just said, "Hey, we're going to pause all of your payments for 6 months. Like, let's get
Amazing.
through this." And verbatim, I won't forget it. One of my partners had come up. He lives in the south side of the state. We're meeting with the lender, and the exact words were like, "Well, thank God it happened to you, Riley." And it took me a second. I gave him a funny look, and he's like, "Oh, let me clarify. The bank and the board is extremely happy that this happened to you and not one of our other customers because we have so much faith in you that you're going to, move the situation along and remediate what has to happen."
Amazing. Amazing.
So,
That's great. Yeah. That's a big lesson in itself. If you have a good lender, keep working with them and, don't always shop around because that way you build a relationship and trust and they're able to help you out. So no capital call. That's another blessing. And I'm
yes.
assuming when you resume operations, it's going to be much better of the hotel. Is that correct? You have new
So,
plans?
so we actually just want to bring it back to we did a huge, $1 million renovation across, um, we completed 18 out of the 22 rooms before we're like, let's go, let's
Oh,
get this
wow.
thing open. Um, and our team did such an amazing job. We really just want to bring them back to that standard that we had beforehand. So we're trying to source all the same materials, all the same furniture, the same beds, linens. I think the biggest difference will just be that the whole building is going to be gut and then completely rewired at that point. And we did have to install a new major mechanical system as well that was too far gone at the end of the fire.
Yeah, and that's another important lesson for any investors out there. You need to look at your electricity as well. Make sure that there's no loose wires, things like that. Because and actually, one of my multifamily properties on Christmas, the electric company LCEC came and they shut it down, and I have tenants there. Completely, and they were like, "Hey, there's loose wires, and this is just so old." And I didn't even notice that because we went through inspection and it wasn't a problem. And they were like, "You need to find someone to replace this, and you need to get permitting." And I told them, "I'm like, I have tenants in there. It's Christmas. Who is gonna pay attention to me?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just calling like crazy, and I finally found someone as well who made a temporary repair, and then they're gonna come back to replace that. But I didn't know that, and out of nowhere, my tenants had no electricity, and it was about to be days, but I needed to act fast, and I already had a relationship that I created with an electric company here, so they were able to handle that situation, and I have to change the electric meters of my multifamily. But that's just an example of like, make sure that there's no loose wires. If you need to be
Hmm.
there with your inspector, be there with your inspector as well. Make sure the electrician sees everything through because it can cause emergencies, but that's just real estate. You need to be able to breathe and really think of creative solutions when these problems happen because they do happen in real estate investing in general.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would say one of the things that I've also changed within the last 2 to 3 years, beforehand I would just get a regular inspector that would come out and take a look at reports. But as we started fostering, these relationships with electricians, general contractors,
Yep.
plumbers, um, they know I'm going to give them the business if I acquire a building. So rather than walk through with just a single, inspector right now, because we're going to start thinking about a scope of work for a property, I'll call
Mhm.
all three of these tradespeople who all three of them work with each other all the time too. So they have relationships with each other. I kind of let them know very briefly, like, this is what we're thinking about doing. Electricians walk the property, tell me what you see, what's going to be a problem. Plumber walk the property, down the
Right.
line. And then I'm getting all this feedback, on the site as we're walking through from these people who are explicitly trained in their trade skills rather than one individual who's kind of a generalist. And
Right.
that's probably saved tens and, maybe maybe even $100,000 on one of our properties right now, just doing that up front rather than
Mhm.
getting that 10-page PDF report where it's like a picture's taken like, "Hey, this looks weird. You might want to consider replacing it." Well, then I still have to have an electrician go out anyway to take a look at this to tell me whether it needs to be replaced or whether it's okay. So cut that first guy out if you don't need them, and I'd say walk with your core group of people who will physically be, swinging a hammer and installing stuff themselves.
Yep, yep, I completely agree. Actually, one of my condos, if you're doing condo investing, when I work with plumbers, because, there are different levels of the condos, I always ask the association, hey, what
Mm,
plumbers are the ones that you guys use? Because those plumbers have worked in that building before and they understand the piping when it comes to
yeah.
these buildings, rather than one that's going to cut a hole in your home because he doesn't know where the pipes are, and then it's the wrong. It's the wrong area, so then it's cutting another hole, so I guess that's just another suggestion if you are, or if, like, let's say you buy a building, right? What plumbers have worked in the areas in the buildings that have a similar structure? What plumbers? And then that's how you can connect. So it saves a lot of time and money. And so you invest in hotels. Do you also invest in apartment buildings?
Um, Not currently.
Okay.
I'm looking at a piece of property right now where I think it could be ground up construction for multifamily. Um,
Cool.
I'm a person who's like, oh, look at that shiny object that's over there.
Oh, you have
So I'm
shiny
really,
object syndrome.
yeah,
That's what it's called.
exactly. So what I'm purposely trying to not do anything with that. I'm not even going to get it under contract. If it goes away, it goes away. But to just make sure that we come through the winter and refocus on all of the both hotels that we have, and then a couple, three other, larger commercial properties to make sure that those are smooth. Um, Time and time again, I've learned that, scaling is not stabilizing. And
Mm,
I feel like we've grown quickly enough over the last couple of years that let's at least take half the year. Let's stabilize just the hell out of everything right now so we can all
yep.
sleep better and then continue to grow from that position of strength.
I love that. And I think you have a very similar background as me. So I'm just curious as to your mindset shift
Mhm.
because I also started with buy and hold rentals. And right now I'm shifting instead of apartment buildings, rather because that would be I guess, the safe jump coming from the buy and hold
Yeah, that's
into
kind of the natural
hotels.
progression.
Right, right. So what shifted you from buy and hold rentals into hotels rather than apartment buildings?
I think I had grandparents when I was, well, I still have grandparents now, thank goodness. When I was younger, my dad's mom and stepdad owned a small resort that we used to go to when we were kids. And I always thought, like, God, this is be so cool to kind of like own your own little thing. And as I was exiting this company, I was thinking like, well, is this the time now? Do we buy this small resort? This romantic idea of getting on a riding lawnmower and like going cabin to cabin and visiting and checking on guests. And so that's what drew us into this space was just this thought that I must really be in love with hospitality. And we got there and we did that, and I realized I still want to do more. So I wanted some other properties. I'm like, okay, I really love hospitality, but I want to build more hospitality. I want to build more assets that are under here. I want to put together a team. And that was the big jump, I think, is you can curate an experience for so many more people through hospitality, short-term rentals, and hotels than you can just from one long-term tenant. And I think the other side of the coin too is one is very, much more passive and stable. And I won't say either one is easier to scale, but it's certainly faster to be able to, turn up the NOI on a commercial
Yeah,
property and force the appreciation there. So I try to look at it these days from the lens of how can I make an impact on people and how can I return my capital at an accelerated rate?
I love that. I love that. That's exactly why I also chose hotels. Now, I want your advice on this because now that I'm looking through hotel deals, Bec because I like the safety and I guess I'm not really risk adverse, I'm looking for
Mhm.
hotels that have kitchenettes. So then worst case scenario, another COVID happens, it can always be converted into an apartment building, of course, with the right how do I say it, with the right permits, right? What do you think about that idea, or should I just, you know what, get a hotel that might take too long?
I think if that's something you really want to do, make it happen. When we bought the Inn on Gumi, that had, little kitchenettes in there, and it's fun and it's great. I think a couple of hard facts about that are one, it will cost a little bit more, but on the other end, the length of stay can now increase for a guest because they don't
Mhm.
have to go out and pay to eat every night. And it's an amenity, so you can increase the nightly rate per room with a kitchenette, or let's say that you install, a gas fireplace, or like any of these things that add a real value to somebody's stay boosts your bottom line. And I think that's an incredible way to look at the problem solve is like, okay, our plan A is hotel. If something happens, here's our plan B. And it would probably be pretty easy to convert a hotel into an apartment complex through permitting. I guess that depends on the city, as long as you don't have to. Maybe it's not sprinklered, you might have to sprinkle it, and that would be a terrible cost to absorb. But I think that's really the right mindset. If A works, great, we're all in. If not, here's a pivot plan and this is a backup. And that's a really smart way to be thinking about it.
Okay, cool. So that's gonna be my first hotel deal in Florida. So if you're ever interested
All
in Florida,
right.
you have someone here. Now, for the last few questions would be, what would you advise someone who's in their hustle to holdings journey? Like last piece of advice.
Don't necessarily fall in love with the mentor that you think is doing the most volume and the most deals. Fall in love with somebody who you think aligns with your personal values at the pace you believe is comfortable for you. As soon as you start crawling in that space, then look to these people who are scaling faster if that's really what you want to do. But make sure that like internally your own inner dialogue, you have alignment with this other person who you want to follow.
I love that. I love that. Do you have a favorite business book?
Oh man, I don't know if I have a favorite business book. I'm kind of all over the place. I don't read a lot of business books too often.
Okay.
I like to go through and I'll find pieces that are information for me. I use that more for like data dissection. Um, I would say at least where I am now, I'm looking for like continuing to feel fulfilled and meaning. I just finished this wonderful book called A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and that's an incredible book. I
Love
would
it.
say that's probably been my most recent one that I was had fallen in love with. That if you can understand your why, you can get through any hardship.
I love that. And what's next for you? So what are your next steps? What's your 2026 goal? I think you said stabilizing. Is that correct? Stabilizing
Yeah,
portfolio?
yes, that's exactly right. So we'll get our other hotel back up and running, turn it on again. I have
Awesome.
a commercial building that I'm in the middle of selling right now, and then take those proceeds, hold, and then probably contribute that to our commercial cleaning company to help scale the
Oh,
services side of the business. And then we
that's
can try
hands in
to stack
hand.
that.
Commercial
Yeah,
cleaning
exactly.
with your commercial. Great. So these are cleaning for hotels as well? You provide cleaners?
So they actually are cleaning more on I didn't want to get too much in the residential stuff, and they weren't working with
Okay.
hotels, but they had a lot of municipal contracts. So they're cleaning for city halls, fire departments, police stations. And it's B2B sales, which is completely new to me. So it's been interesting to walk down that funnel and really identify like how long does it take to actually get a contract. You have to talk to more stakeholders in an organization to get that
Yeah.
contract. But when you get to a yes, you're on a contract, which is great, right? They can't drop you. And that contract value is incredible. So rather than trying to sell, a bunch of, $250 cleanings to a bunch of residential services, I'd rather it take 6 months for me to get to a $30,000 cleaning contract over a couple of years.
Yeah, that's much it's a not I would say it is a way of creating more passive, I would say, income, right? Because it's a contract, so it's coming to you on a monthly basis. So that's
Absolutely.
amazing. That's a smart way of thinking about it. Awesome, Riley. So where can people learn more about you and contact you as well?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. It's at the Brennan Buzz. I'm also on Facebook, Reilly Brennan. I don't have any like crazy great branding. Every once, I just sometimes will put stuff up to follow along with the journey. And everybody can also email me, Riley at thetrailsidehotel.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Riley, and for making the time to be able to teach me and the audience about your journey and inspiring us and others. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Amy. I appreciate it.